Howdy of you delicious people, I'm here today to view Enter the Dragon. So, one thing that I feel that I need to rebuttal, because I had done a little bit of research, some legwork before going into this film, and having to course correct some things that I'd gone on and said, or one thing that I'd gone on and said via prior reviews. So, Chuck Norris had gone on to fight Bruce Lee in the movie The Way of the Dragon, and I think stated that this movie was the one where Bruce Lee had fought Chuck Norris. That did not happen. Um, but also Game of Death, there is a Chuck Norris Bruce Lee fighting scene there that I think is to be just copied and stolen from The Way of the Dragon. So getting that finally cleared up, because I looked through IMDb, Chuck Norris was there in that movie. The interview of which that I went on and was to get very confused about was a Conan O'Brien interview done by Chuck Norris talking about a Bruce Lee film, and they had even gotten the name wrong of Return of the Dragon, which there was seemingly no Return of the Dragon. It is what it is. For whatever reason, maybe there was a name change of that movie. I don't know. But also there was an interesting part of that interview where Chuck Norris goes on to talk about not being able to take on a mass number of people, but if they were to kind of come at him all 1v1 at a time, that he could probably take them all down. And the limit of which that he would have reached is like 8 people. So like, it is interesting to just kind of see the real true movie magic of it all, where you can go on and have Bruce Lee be surrounded by like 30 people, but he's always going to take them on one at a time. He's not going to go on and take on like 3 or 4, then 5 and what. No, like, that's not really going to happen, because he'll get overwhelmed and then he'll lose. Kind of like Chuck Norris had gone on to fight a group of people and lost within that battle within one of his films. But let's talk more about this film, Enter the Dragon. So this movie, of course, has the iconic mirror scene, which you would come to find a lot of action movies within our time stealing this mirror fight scene. Kind of look at movies like the Alec Baldwin movie Shadow. Like, towards the end of that film, eventually there is to be kind of a face-off between these two characters, and it's all done through this mirror scene. And eventually, Alec Baldwin beats the mirror scene the exact same way that Bruce Lee goes on and does it in Into the Dragon. Like, just showing one example of a mirror fight scene, but I'm sure there's a million other examples of a mirror fight scene that you guys would, of course, know all good and well, with the exclusion of also the Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, kind of copying and pasting from Enter the Dragon as well. But also, come to find out, supposedly right before or sometime during Enter the Dragon, we would have Bruce Lee that is to want to go on and get, like, very, like, saddened that he is not going to go on and spend more time with his family in America. So after Enter the Dragon, it seems, Bruce Lee, I guess, had gone back to America and had focused on kind of doing as many projects as he could there, or dare say, whichever was to just kind of still be having Bruce Lee to be putting films together. But so, Enter the Dragon, like, of course, has the iconic mirror scene to kind of lend itself. But I feel that also, like, in the martial arts genre, I think a lot of people are to kind of steal or copy and paste from this film. Like, I feel that there is also, like, a very much heavily, like, martial arts Batman animated series that I had gone on to review at some point that was to just kind of heavily steal from this film. Like there's so many like scenes that just kind of blatantly like copy and paste from this film. But so also like I feel that I have to go on as always and want to compare this movie to a number of things. So here we go. Um More than likely I'm going to easily have to state stuff like Mortal Kombat just because it feels just kind of fairly similar in a lot of ways. But again, without the monsterish element of it all. Uh, but then also there is to just be kind of similar stuff like Jean-Claude Van Damme's like The Quest or Bloodsport, which eventually also has one of the characters from this film kind of being the fighting character within most of Jean-Claude's movies. But then also wanting to go on and compare this movie to like James Bond like movies, like it kind of breaks down like that. But then also wanting to even more so realize that this movie is fairly similar to a movie that I had gone on and reviewed at one point called Arena 2010 or 2011. And that is to go on and have Kellen Lutz and Samuel L. Jackson within it. And uh, that is to be fairly similar with the exclusion of like the main character ends up getting like kidnapped away into this caged like environment where he is to be forced to fight all these people or die. Um, but really, like a lot of the elements that get kind of put within through this movie are to be fairly similar to that Arena film, but it's kind of more modernized. Um, but so, I'm sure there's a number of other things that I probably forgot about comparing it to or forgot about tying in within this film because uh, this film is just so just amazing that like I don't know like I kind of bounce around both either calling it great or epic just because of the mirror scene. Like that's like where that thing has come from, and everybody has just kind of copied and sold and pasted for a number of years, and never really made that true connection up until now about that. But hey, like it's also just kind of an interesting visual to be placed within a film, regardless. So, Enter the Dragon. We come to find that this is again another revenge story. We would also have a change of pace within this movie where we'd have a guy named Williams that I do not like how he's treated within this film. I do not like eventually where the character heads. I love the character, but like the way that eventually like this character like finishes up, let's just say, just I'm like, man, like this is the worst. Um, but on the flip side of things, Lee has a sister within this film, and she starts beating the crap out of all these guys, and I'm like, all right. And we have like a whole stretch of scene where it's just Lee's sister within this story. I'm like, oh my god, they're spending so much time on this. This is freaking awesome. And to look back on this, I'm like, man, like I wish that this movie or movies would have had a little bit more of that. But again, like I'm probably asking for way too much because every one of these films should be like a Bruce Lee focused film. But again, like it is what it is. But so Enter the Dragon delivers us a story where Lee is to make his way to this tournament to be called upon by this agent of sorts to say, hey, like since you're going on into this tournament, we're gonna go and kind of give you everything that you are to want, all this gadgetry, all of these things that you're gonna go on and need to to make it there and be able to do what you need to do. And for the most part, I think Lee, the only thing that he legitimately needed was like some rope, and that was really just about it. And a picture of some girl, because guys to be just so talented that like what does he need with all kinds of like weird gadgets and James Bondish like things for when really he can just beat the crap out of people and that's good enough. Man, if they would have really gone on and changed Bruce Lee into be much more of like a tech guy, I would have just been like, no, no. Like, we don't need that for Bruce Lee. But so, Bruce is to go on into this tournament, and while everybody is like starting to kind of fight one another, he goes on into this kind of underground lair to find out some things about this Han character. And this Han character is obviously the most Bondish villain that I've ever seen in a Bruce Lee movie. He seriously has a freaking cat, and he has his own little weird hand thing about him. And like, yeah, like this movie is just so like interesting for how it plays out, but then also like I'm so kind of going through this movie and thinking like, okay, like we'd um have O'Hara that looks very much like Kano, or uh we'd have Roper who's just like uh a kind of Luke Cage kind of character. And like I'm just kind of looking at this through like the Mortal Kombat lens of things, and kind of placing these characters as Mortal Kombat characters because their stories are fairly similar. And also the loss of a sibling is Lee's character to a T. So really stating that Mortal Kombat just copied and pasted this movie without you being aware of it, so you should probably just be bitter about that. Man, they really just did rip off this entire film without us realizing it. Oh well. But hey, they gave us Sub Zeros and Scorpions and all these other things, so I guess that's the difference of it all. But so Lee throughout this film, in between the whole kind of tournament bit, we have him just kind of sneaking around, and that leads other people to have problems with Han, and that leads people to either get killed, to either kind of be like put under the thumb of Han, to just be like, well, hey, like I want to work with you, and like I want you to control like our side of the business on the American front. And so hey, like if you do everything that I want and you accomplish all that I want you to, like hey, we're going to be in business together. And we would of course have that person who is going to be on that supposed side just be like, well, no. Like so so yeah, so this movie is to just be a lot of fun. It's great slash epic. It's somewhere in between. Like it's a solid, great film. And other than that, I think it's about that time to just kind of roll out and go into real legitimate spoilers of it all. Because again, kind of giving you all the feels of this film. And also, it was kind of nice within this movie to see more of like ghetto like areas within Hong Kong instead of um, where kind of some of the other places were to have given us like actual like locales and kind of possibly traditional like karate studios. Like this was to kind of give us like a different kind of Hong Kong, or or whatever location that they were actually filming in for this film, and I was to actually appreciate that. as well as probably most of this film also supposedly to be probably put together on an island, I guess. But anyways, I think it's about that time to just spoil all this film, get into the nitty gritty details, and at the end of the day, it's time to say, it is. Oh, where can you go on and see this film? I should probably state that because sometimes I forget. Uh, I feel the obvious thing to throw this to is a app called Zelifonic, Zelivonic. You can go on to a Google Play Store and hopefully find this app, download it, and be able to watch this and a lot more for absolutely free. I could probably suggest a number of other apps, but I'm not quite sure if this one is located upon there. Uh, Really, also, there is a number of reviews that I've gone on and done here more recently that I've stated a number of other apps you can dare in fact watch a number of content for absolutely free. So not only check out this review, and I do thank you for it, but then also check out the others, especially all the other Bruce Lee films, so you can hear me probably mistakenly say something about Chuck Norris being in some film that he wasn't actually in, uh, called Enter the Dragon, because I made that mistake. So, with that said, instead of holding you up, let's get into full-on deep dish action of spoiler time, because it is about that time yet again. Let's of course go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie and get into the nitty gritty of it all. I'm going to go on and pause this video here so I can whip out my cast list and whatever else is to be legitimately on my phone or whatever else is to be within my brain. First, somehow I can try to figure out and remember what goes in within this film. It's honestly going to be fairly hard within this review to remember or know who all everyone is, simply because this has a massive cast of a film. But then also there seems to just kind of be characters where it's like, okay, who is this exactly? I'm assuming this character may be just a monk, and this character is just to be called Old Man. And legitimately, there seems to be no real other name besides that, or stuff like Lee's sister. Don't know her actual name. So with that said, plus also it's fairly hard to just find a legitimate cast list of pictures and whatever, because especially when you would go through a thing and the pictures are kind of characters that are either years old or whatever in between. It's very difficult. So with that said, let's pause here. I will be back. All right, guys. One thing I have to say, I am just utterly shocked by how well these Bruce Lee reviews are doing. It really doesn't matter that like there might be just so few people that are talking about these films or whatever. Like, really, just thank everybody that is going on and watching these things and hearing whatever I have to say about them. Because really, like, I'm just so happy for how well these are actually a video of mine actually doing, because of for how long that I would have gone on to really just like search and find things and realize how like why this one. But like there was just something about it that I just felt that I just needed to talk about it, and regardless of how well the end result was, like I was just to be um going like, well, like there's always tomorrow. But it seemed that finally it's like, okay, all right, like we're going into these and uh and they're actually doing well. So that's nice. It's a nice turnaround. We'll see how long it legitimately lasts, but hey, it's been a blast. It really has been, to just kind of talk about these things. So, without, I'm just trying to say thank you, if anything. So let's get into the very beginning of this. So the opening of this film is to have a bunch of monks and a bunch of kind of surrounding karate geared men. And Bruce Lee is going on and fighting against a man called Sammo Hung, who we've just kind of traditionally possibly seen in every single Bruce Lee movie imaginable, it seems. It seems that this guy, for one reason or another, is somewhere in one of these films, depending on what kind of role he ends up being. So, there's a face-off between the two of them, and I think it feels kind of even. But then eventually, within this film, there's a lot more like wrestling moves, as well as also there being martial arts here. So it kind of becomes a lot more mixed martial arts than just martial arts within this film, especially when you have Bolo coming in, and Bolo is doing like arm bars and kind of military presses and a bunch of just kind of more wrestling, like turning people into pretzels kind of maneuvers than actual legitimate just like sparring or squaring off with somebody. But so the two of these men are fighting, and the tail end of this fight, and it's honestly a pretty good fight. And I'm looking at Bruce Lee, I'm like, God, he looks so thin in this film. He looks so like amazingly in shape in this movie. Like if he had like 12-pack abs, like I wouldn't argue, because man, this guy is just wow. So Bruce or Lee in this movie goes on to kind of trip this guy into an armbar, and it almost kind of looks like a wrestling pin in some capacity, where they go on and do this thing called the roll up. Like it kind of looks like that, but like we would have Lee that turns this into an armbar, and Sammo ends up tapping out here. So the thing that I love about this movie is they talk a lot more about karate philosophy, and like we start that right here with Lee going on after this whole match and talking to this monk, and eventually like the next tier of Lee's skill is to really just not be like thinking at all about punching. It just happens to where like it's not even impulse, it's just like he like his body knew, like he didn't have to know, like his body just knew. And so the two of them are going on and talking about like possible like illusions and things that at some point Lee may have to kind of deal with at the third act of this film. But so the two of them are having this amazing like kind of just talk about philosophy here, and really I'm getting very thinned about what it actually entailed within it, but man is it good. But so we then have Lee, who goes on to talk to a guy named Braithwaite. Very unusual name. Braithwaite? Braithwaite? Very. Bleh. So Lee goes on and talks to this man, and Braithwaite is to want Lee to come to this tournament and get involved. And Lee is just like, you know what, I think that might be reserved for possibly somebody else and not me. And so Lee is to seemingly hesitate, but then eventually he agrees to Braithwaite's agreement to go to this tournament. So Lee turns to this kind of younger student, and we almost have this kind of there's a moment in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles where Tatsu is going on and fighting against one of his own foot members, because his foot member is kind of going on and doing like really well. So Tatsu's like, oh, okay, well, I'll knock you down a peg. And they go on and they start fighting, and the foot character ends up going on and he bows to Tatsu, and Tatsu's like, never lower your eyes to an enemy. Where Bruce goes on and tells this kid, it's like, hey, never lower your eyes to an opponent. Like, always kind of look at them, but even like still bow at them, but just still like eye to eye with them, or otherwise they're gonna slap you upside the head. But so Lee is going on and tutoring this combatant, because he's going on and like, hey, like you need to like kick me, uh like give me emotion, like give me content, like as if you're a YouTuber. Give me content. I want content. I need it desperately, because I gotta do it every day. So the further and further this kid continues to just try and just bap Lee, and continues to get closer and closer and closer, Lee's just like, all right, you got it, kid. But then that's when he bows, like, no, never lower your eyes to an opponent. And so baps him on the head again. So why they had this in the movie, like, it's like, okay, like, it makes no sense of why it's there, but actually it's a great thing about this film. Like that little extra scene, that little extra, like, teaching moment that Lee is just giving to this kid. Like, it's amazing to have had in this film. So we transition to Williams, the man coming from this airport, making his way into Hong Kong, looking at all the amazing sights, and I'm like, all right, this is sweet. This is freaking awesome. We're getting a real like tour of this locale, and it's freaking awesome. So Williams and Roper make their way through the town, being carried by these chariots of sorts. So all while that's going on, we have Braithwaite that is going on and having this this projector role for Lee, going on and making him aware about Han, and also O'Hara that has had this scar upon his face, which is foreshadowing to see how he was to have gone on and had that scar happen within this story. Because in the tapes that they're kind of showing about him going on and doing some kind of wood smashing or brick smashing, or some kind of just traditional karate-ish like maneuvers, but like they even further it up a notch by like placing some stuff on fire, and all of this, just kind of really showcasing how O'Hara is just this really skilled man. But when it's going to come down to Lee, like, Lee is driven by revenge, and there's nothing O'Hara can freaking do. No matter like if like O'Hara whips out a 45 gun and just plow, Bruce Lee is just gonna grab that bullet and have it in his mouth like the Last Dragon did, and just be like, dude, you messed with the wrong guy. Like, didn't like legitimately, like, Lee in the other Game of Dragon, like, dude got shot and he lived. He lived through that, and he just got cosmetic surgery and they changed his face, and like, so like, you can't take down Bruce Lee. Yeah, eventually he did die, sadly enough, but still, like, and also freaking that man, like, I'm sure with the rigorous amount of just training and everything, like, I can easily understand like why that guy was to eventually be not to probably have a very longevous life. like with all the stuff that he's gone on and done in his entire life, but like, what a freaking legend, regardless. What a freaking, like, guy who has gone on to, like, done so much for um, a whole entire, like, martial arts community in general and whatever. Uh, to even have, like, Dana White stating that, like, Bruce Lee was, like, the key into martial arts. But anyways, I'm going all over the place. I'm sorry. So, Braithwaite, goofy name, God. I just want to call him BW almost, just to not have to bizarrely just say that weird name. But he's also showcasing this palace that Lee is going to have to make his way into and infiltrate. But then also they showcase that there's to have been some stewardess who her body was found. So yeah, and I believe her name was King something. I don't know. It shows it within the film. So Braithwaite goes on and gives Lee this photo, and it is a girl who's named Ling. And I'm thinking, like, did Lee hit that in this movie? Not literally, I mean figuratively. Like, did he you know, like, there's a point in the movie where he meets up with this girl, and like, she's supposed to be a girl that's like offered to Lee. So I'm like, so did he knock some boots? Did he do the horizontal mamba before going on and like wearing that blue turtleneck and infiltrating this underground Batcave-esh like place? Only we could just ponder within our brains. But hey, it seems that we're getting like some flashes at some point of some women within this film, beyond the whole fighting thing. But also we're just seeing some topless women in some points of this film. So good, we're getting like some straight up action, but also some action. God. So Bruce is to make his way, or Lee is to make his way on this boat, and this boat is just kind of like shimmering back and forth with this kind of oar. It's just, all right, okay. So we start to get all of these characters that all have these flashbacks leading them to this moment, almost like in a very retroactive Mortal Kombat like way, because every single one of the characters, like Williams and Roper and Lee, like, they have all stories to get them to this point. But yeah. So Lee's story for getting him to this point is having an old man sit Lee down and tell him the truth about his sister. That he himself and his sister had a day in the town, and they were all of a sudden swarmed by O'Hara and a bunch of other men. So the more that these people were to go on and start touching onto Lee's sister tried to combat them. The old man whipped out this knife and was to slice O'Hara in the face. I'm like, yeah, you go, old man, regardless of what's going to happen. Because we know you're going to end up alive, but that other girl, though. So Lee's sister is running from this group, and the further and further that she's running, all of a sudden some of them just kind of come out of the woodwork somewhere. They kind of jump at her, and she's like, pat, 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 and freaking knocks him out. And we're seeing all kinds of, like, what is to be, I guess, supposedly told to us as, like, the ghetto part of Hong Kong, we're to naturally assume here. But, like, legitimately, I'm just like, all right, like, again, more Great Eastern visuals. So we would have this sister that's making her way, just fighting all these guys all that she can, because her life is on the line here. And so she goes into what she assumes is a safe place, is to just chuck this piece of wood to just kind of have a lock for this door, and naturally think like, okay, maybe these people are going to find me in here. But then all of a sudden things go flying through these windows and men start to make their way in, almost kind of like in the Ninja Turtles movie. I'm having to compare so much here, where they go into, I think, April's place, and the foot start like crashing into the place, and they're just like, all right, okay, fellow Chucker here. Wheel of Fortune, and talking about Vanna and lumberjacks and it all. Just at some point, I want to go on and also like just talk more about Ninja Turtles. But then again, legitimately, I would just need to just do a review about them, and it's been a couple of number of days since doing so. But at some point, I want to get back into that, but I don't know the best. I don't know the best way to attack that. I really don't. Like, I'm going on and just kind of reviewing the movies, but that isn't good enough. So it's like, what show will do it? Like, what other means of whatever will be the most effective thing to go into that for? But oh well, it's just it's a losing battle. But like, hey, I'm still having freaking fun while doing it. It doesn't really matter. So back into the story, sadness happens. It does. If I'm to just reflect on Ninja Turtles. Can I just go back to that? Because I don't want to say what happens next. So, Lee's sister gets swarmed here, and O'Hara is to make his way to Lee's sister. And so Lee's sister is to have seen all this glass on the ground. She takes it, and I'm just like, oh my god, like this is like the early stages of the Wolverine film, where we have a bunch of those guys all like taking these swords and like, and I'm like, oh my god. Lee's sister goes on and does the same thing, takes this glass, stabs it into herself, murders herself, and dies, sadly enough. So Lee, after hearing the whole story that the old man told, it's like, all right, like, if I can go on and if I can get to Han, I can get to O'Hara, but then also, like, one and the same, like, I'm gonna just wipe them all out. Like, this is revenge again 101. Like, I'm freaking just wiping everybody out. So, Lee then goes to the grave of his mother and his sister. He's telling them, it's like, hey, like, I'm kind of like I'm kind of going against all that you've ever taught me and all that I've ever learned and whatever. And like I'm coming for blood. Like I'm coming like to avenge you. So hey, like don't look down on me on this day, because I'm gonna do what I feel is best. Kind of like there's a lot of paraphrasing going on, and I know I always do that. I don't do it exactly like the film does, because the film does it a million times better. But anyways, setting up where Lee has come from to where he is now, back upon this boat. Guy's still like, man, like, are we still filming this? Man, like, this oar is kind of getting heavy. So we then go on to Roper. Roper, we would come to find out is playing a little golf in his flashback with a guy who is just to be called Golfer, a secretary who is just to be called Secretary. I had to look them up. But did I see anything? No, I saw jack crap nothing. But Golfer and Secretary. So, come on to find that the Secretary is actually Roper's secretary, but her name is just Secretary. whatever. So Roper ends up kind of getting into the grassy. He had a horrible shot, crap hole shot. I would state that I had gone golfing once in my life, and like I was just a person that was just hitting for power, not actually to think that I could do well at all or really even keep track of how well I was doing. Like I was just smacking the ball and hoping that eventually it would just like, okay, like let's get to the next hole. Like we had a freaking billion of holes to just kind of go into. And that just seems like a bizarre innuendo, but but anyways, Roper goes on to just smack his ball away. So he separates from his secretary and the other golfer to meet up with these loan sharks. So these loan sharks have this kind of gun on Roper, and they're like, "Well, hey man, uh, like the Freddy wants 175," and Roper's like, "Well, I thought it was 150," and it's like, "No, man, like, like we're gonna send you a message from Freddy," and so they start like beating him up. Freddy goes on and starts to dismantle the guys, and realizes like, "Man, I gotta get the heck out of here." So Roper's flashback. So now we then are seeing Williams. Williams, it seems, is coming from a Kempo karate dojo. I'm not quite sure exactly the wording of this karate dojo. Like there was a KF on one side of one karate thing, and then there was also possibly me having some weird thought that it was Kempo, or I don't know, like the writing on the thing is just kind of quickly shown upon the background. But so Williams is to meet up with, I'm assuming, his teacher, and just kind of have the moment where they just kind of briefly, just kind of have a handshake, hug it out kind of thing, and then he goes on to leave for this tournament. Like they don't say a word to one another, this teacher or Williams. Like we just have to naturally assume that this guy has a karate background. So here's what I do not like about this film. So Williams goes off to just kind of walk along to make his way, I'm assuming, to an airport to get this flight for this tournament. And we have these police who are going to stop Williams. So they notice that he has an airplane ticket to go to Hawaii. And like Hawaii, like he's not going to make it to Hawaii. As they go on and try to attack him, he tries to defend himself. I believe he even goes on to even commandeer their police car and get the heck out of Dodge. And so back to Williams upon the boats and the oars and just like, man, you guys still filming this scene? Holy like we've been doing this for like 3 years now. Kind of like I've gone on and just stretched this out and I didn't mean to. It just happens that way when I'm trying to do jokes and hilarity and comedy and whatever. But anyways, Roper and Williams are to join themselves upon this boat. And it seems that the two of them are to be good friends. And it seems that one another are just kind of looking out for one another, just be like, well, hey man, like, who is that guy? It's like, oh, that's Parsons. It's like, oh, well, hey, who's that guy? Don't know. They're talking about Lee. So both Williams and both Roper here are like, all right, okay, like we're just kind of sizing everybody up here, and like, if anything, like we'll see how this all plays out in this tournament. Which the tournament becomes both Williams and Roper like both trying to get some side hustle money out of this tournament. And I was like, okay, like I don't like that at all. But I get it. There always has to be some kind of money wager kind of going on. And Roper, I think, is desperate for money anyway, so it's logical for him to just try to squeeze a buck out of this whole thing. As well as also, we'll find out later when they're uh, having this kind of weird battle of praying mantises. Mantises? I don't know what the plural of that is. And Roper is kind of making bets on that between him and Bruce Lee. So immediately then thereafter is to be the praying mantis fight. Lee is to go on and pick the mantis that he thinks is gonna win, and of course it does. And so Lee's like, "Pony up the dough, buddy." Roper ends up giving him money, and then later on, Roper asks Lee, "It's like, I hope that you don't spend all my money, because I want to try to figure out a way that I can get it back from you." It's like, ha ha ha, that's not gonna happen, because I'm gonna beat the crap out of you and everybody else here. Unless we team up together. And then maybe I'll just kind of slip some money your way without anybody noticing on camera. So this Parsons guy, the Parsons guy is a bit of a dick, just in all honesty, just having to swear and whatever. Parsons is to go on and see this guy with this basket of oranges, not a basket of kittens or puppets or puppets? Puppies. No. Guy just has oranges, and so Parsons is just like, well, I'm going to trip this guy just to see if he wants to just punch me in the face. But he doesn't, because he cowers, and he's just like, hey, man, you're going to just tear me apart. So Parsons is going on to just sizing everybody up, looks at Lee, is like, hey, man, like, what kind of karate style do you have? And Lee is just like, well, like, let me show you. How about we go on this boat together and get on this island and just duke it out? So Parsons like, okay, let's do this. So Parsons gets on this boat, and Lee is to be like behind him. So instead of actually getting on the boat, Lee controls the boat and is to kind of separate it from the rest of the ship. And so he's now holding onto this rope, like, ha ha, Parsons. And so Parsons is starting to have his boat rock so much that water is getting into it and it's almost sinking. And so it's like, ha ha, everybody's having a good time. All of the weird extra characters are kind of grabbing onto this rope and kind of adjusting with it. And Parsons like, oh my God, how dare you? And whatever in his accent. But so we finally get our characters to the island, and it seems that Bolo is there and Tanya is there. Tanya wasn't to have been in IMDb, but luckily I could have Googled searched who Tanya was beforehand and figured out who Tanya was. Luckily. Because it seems that she is a bigger character when it gets into this tournament stuff. She's kind of like the person who brings in all of these women, and so I legitimately had to know who she actually was. So Roper is going on and talking to Lee and is looking at Tanya, is like, like I want me some of that woman right there. I want me some of that. So we're figuring out that this is going to be a foreshadowing to where Roper is going to try to figure out how he can go on and get him some of that Tanya, and he will. So we're making our way to this compound, seeing the just hundreds upon hundreds of all these people going into doing these ha ha ha, just ha, a whole lot of ha going on, and a lot of people just kind of doing like just a lot of karate and moves and sweep the legs and Daniel-san. I don't know what they're doing. There's just a whole lot of just mounds of just karate white dogi looking folks going on here, and to the point where you get to the finally of this compound. So Tanya's letting everybody and their brother know, like, hey guys, like, get ready for this banquet that we're gonna have a good time, and like make your way to the place that you're gonna be hanging your head for the night and whatever, and and probably switch your outfits because you probably aren't going to be wearing the exact same thing that you're wearing in the banquet because wardrobe just has a plethora of things for you to just have, it seems. So we go into this banquet, and so not only are we bizarrely having these like sumo wrestlers just having it out, but then also in between the sumo wrestlers, we're also having these like these bird cages up high for some goofy freaking reason. I don't know why. That's just an unusual visual, but maybe that's some traditional thing within the culture. I'm not sure what the heck that is. There's just a lot of bird cages everywhere. I don't know what's going on. Help me figure it out. But so also amongst these sumo wrestlers, there's also these like tumblers that are just flipping and tumbling and dropping and farting. I don't know, like they're doing a whole bunch like a circus is in town. Like I don't know what's going on here. Somebody help me. What the heck is all this? I'm having a good time. I really am. So we have Roper, and he's like going on to just start like mingling with some folks here, as we're kind of seeing O'Hara and Tanya kind of in the background in some parts here. But so Roper is starting to like commingle, and so he makes his way. He makes his way to Lee, and he also talks to Williams here. So, of course, Roper is to say to Lee about the whole money situation and possibly getting it back and this and that. And Roper then goes on to meet up with Williams, and Williams is just kind of struggling to figure out like what best food he can have to just kind of keep down. Because it seems that this is to be a different kind of flavor of culture here. Hey, like freaking, I love Chinese food. I say Chinese food, but again, we're in a different locale. But anyways, like I would go to like Lian Chin's, but that's kind of like the American version of probably Chinese food. But hey, it's still rice and it's still good and it's still whatever. If there was a Chinese restaurante or a you know what I mean, like that kind of food closer to my house on a consistent basis, I would eat it a lot more. I would, or legitimately, I would want to go on and just consistently get more stuff that is to be more of that kind of food. Why am I stating all of this? I just am. I'm sorry. So it's just the truth. It is. I probably should just have ramen noodle. Isn't that what everybody else has? Because it's on the cheap. So anyways, and also I want to try that really hot ramen noodle stuff. Moving on. So Roper and Williams are going on and talking about how like Williams is having a hard time with figuring out food. So they're having a conversation. And then eventually Han comes in with all of his yellow outfitted womans. And so he goes on and is to like just kind of welcome everybody and all this and that, and talk about how that these people had to have gone on into like 2+ years of training to get to this point, and so on and so forth. So he goes on and introduces them, and then he starts chucking these apples, and these girls are to toss these darts within them, and people are just to go on and catch them. And at some point, Lee goes on and catches the dart that Ling had tossed. I say it's a dart, but then also like it was like earrings from all of these girls. So was it a dart or was it an earring? Beats me. But it was just like eventually Lee goes on and states that it is a dart. So just a bizarre layer of things. So after the whole banquet and the good times and the noodle salad being had, I'm sure noodle salad was served at this locale. So Williams is going on and getting into some music, and I'm like, all right. Anyways, so Williams, while seemingly just minding his own business, is to be interrupted by a plethora of women and Tanya stating like, all right, like, choose your gift, like, choose the form of your destructor, because you're going to be doing some late night humping. And so we would go on to then have Williams who's like, well, I'm choosing her, and I'm choosing her, and I'm choosing a little bit of her, and I'm choosing that, and so he's like, yeah, like I'm just kind of choosing just a few here because I want to like conserve my strength. And so Tanya's like, all right, good play, good play. So William goes on and is to just tear through a lot of these women. So Tanya ends up going on and talking to Lee. It's like, well, hey, like, what do you want? Like, what do you want out of these prize women here? Lee is like, well, hey, I want the girl who was to have given me this dart. Oh, that's Lee. All right. Oh, okay. All right. So Roper ends up getting the same offer, and Roper is like, well, I've already chosen who I want. I want me some of that Tanya. And so it's like, all right. So Lee goes on to talk to Ling. Lee and Ling, very confusing here. So the two of them are having a conversation, and like Lee is kind of getting the lay of the land here, and kind of Ling is just kind of giving him a full like kind of layout and what's going on and everything. So because like if anything, Braithwaite was to go on, or Breathwaite, or Bear Blade, that guy's name. I said it right probably at some point, right? That dude that is to be very much like a Q or Jeeves or whoever, that guy, Alfred, whoever that guy is. Like, hey, you gotta meet with this woman, and so he did. So, the following day, we would have Lee, who's going on and doing some kicks, doing some practice runs, and O'Hara ends up opening the doors, like, all right, like, come on, buddy, like, morning practice. So, Lee goes out there in his own gi, his own getup, and we have one of the men who are stopping Lee. It's like, hey man, like, you need to put on like the you gotta put on the swag, you gotta put on the merch. And Lee is like, no, F off with your merch. I don't want to wear your brand, I don't want to wear your logo. Like, I got my sweet threads right here, and I'm not taking them off for anybody. Or do I have to take something off, like your face? Pah! Man, if that would have just been the transaction between the two of them, that would have been legitimately funnier. But Leah just be like, nah, I'm not putting on your duds. I'm not wearing your logo. I'm not wearing your brand. You. Like, I don't like you people. Like, I'm just here to win no matter what. Straight up. So then we have, of course, a layout here of Han sitting down next to Tanya and some purple get-up girls. So Han is like, all right, like, we're putting the tournament together. And so, like, now, like, the next fighters are going to go on and ugh. Let me pause here for 1 second. All right, honestly, had no clue where I was. within the film. I'm like, wait a minute, like, where are we? When are we? Because it's like, okay, like this is the first early part of the tournament, but I'm like, does Lee face off with O'Hara like very soon? But I'm like, no, like there has to be a build up to that. But I'm like, where does that start? So the very first face off here is to be between both Williams and Parsons here. That's the very first fight because I had to kind of reload my brain here. So the very first fight, we had Parsons and Williams, while Roper is kind of off to the side, just kind of whispering sweet nothings to this one guy, just being like, "Hey, la 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 la, like this amount of money for that amount of money, 4-1 odds, double down." Uh, Joker Wild. All right. So Parsons, sadly enough, gets his butt kicked by Williams. Of course he does. So Roper then goes to face off against his own opponent, and Roper is telling Williams, like, hey man, like, make it 8-3 odds or something. So Williams is going on and talking to this guy, whispering sweet nothings, and Roper is like kind of perfectly like figuring out a way for his opponent to just kind of beat him down, and then by the time that there is to be the kind of going on here, Roper ends up going on to like just beat the crap out of this guy, take him out, and just be like, yeah, like we just made some fat cash out of this one fight out. So next we see Tanya thrust it on top of Roper's back, just massaging it and probably just doing it also with some top of less. So Tanya and Roper are talking, and it gets to some heated, passionate moments that end up getting cutting away from, sadly enough. So speaking of cutting away, we're cutting into Williams that is cutting away from a late night banging sesh to then want to go on and decide to go outside. And the women are just like, hey man, like don't go outside. And Williams is like, I can do my own thing. Like if anybody's gonna just snap at me, I'm gonna snap their necks. So Lee ends up getting on his blue turtleneck and has his little bag of goodies, while also Ling is also there. So Lee escapes to make his way through this palace, kind of hiding from these guards, at some point needing to go on and knock a few of them out. There is one point in this movie where legitimately Lee, in the later half of this film, jumps into this tree, and you could obviously realize that this is a shot that is done from, like, Lee had to have jumped from the tree, and they did it in reverse to make it look like he jumped into the tree. It makes no rational sense of how he had gone on and done this. So it had to have been reverse. Like, that was a really poor, like, reverse shot, and honestly, they didn't need to have actually even need to have done that shot at all. So Lee goes on to sneak outside of this place to find that there's a dog there. Arr, 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 arr. He's like, hey, nice doggy, whatever. So Lee goes on to knock a few of the goons out again. Oh, I guess we got to this a lot sooner than I thought. He jumps up into the tree. Fuck. So Lee makes it into this underground place and is to rope to go down into this little tunnel. So he's doing this rope, and at some point there's these kind of guys that are kind of making their way into this area. So Lee is forced to then need to just kind of wait it out. But then at some point, there's to be this guy that ends up trying to cut the rope. So Lee has to come all the way back up to knock some sense out of some fools. So Williams is eventually spotting Lee. And it's like, okay, all right. Like, so, like, the very next day, Han is going on telling all these people, like, well, hey, like, somebody last night they just decided to just kind of mess around last night. More so than a lot of you guys just banging it out, if you know what I mean. So Han is to feel that a lot of his guards are insufficient. So he wants to go on and basically just have them beat to death here by Bolo, because that's what he legitimately goes on and does. But Han is like, I don't know exactly who the culprit is, and I'm not going to state who I think it is now. But hey, everybody, just be, like, on eggshells. Because I'm coming for you. I'm going to have some suspicions, and I'm going to start questioning people, and they're probably going to end up dead, sadly enough. But Bolo is going to go on and just stretch some people out, just for the enjoyment of the crowd. So Bolo comes in, guy that I've known from so many other Van Damme films, comes in here, and he starts just freaking just jumping on folks and breaking freaking ribs and pretzeling some guy in a very bizarre way, as if he's like carrying him, but then he's like carrying him. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Like, is he like breaking him in half when we can't tell how he's breaking him in half? I don't know what's going on here. But there is just a lot of like, just Bolo is just wrecking house. He's doing his duty. So the actual fight commences between both Lee and O'Hara. So O'Hara thinks he's like, oh man, like I got this in the bag, everybody, high five, like cowabunga, like God, so many Ninja Turtles references within this one movie. So O'Hara goes on to like be coming at Lee, to just have Lee just be kicking him down or smacking him down consistently. And O'Hara's like, what the fuck? Like, I should be like winning this thing. Like, come on. So O'Hara just keeps getting up regardless of points, regardless of how he's pretty much lost consistently. So O'Hara gets up no matter what, no matter how much he's starting to bleed, no matter how he's going to be left bleeding and bloody along the way. So O'Hara goes on and takes these bottles. He smashes them. And he's like, ah. So at first they were probably figuring out a way to try to stop this. Like Hans was just like, O'Hara, come on. Come on, man. Like, you've already lost your balls. Like, try to leave with some kind of dignity here. I wasn't going for the joke, but then it was there, so I went there. So Bruce goes on again, takes O'Hara out. Freaking, like, bottles won't stop this man. Bullets won't stop this man. Yeah, so freaking O'Hara gets taken out. So Lee gets his freaking revenge. Technically. It's part one of the revenge tour that he's going on here. So it's all like, alright, like freaking fights have been done this day. So Williams is to be called into Hans's office, like the principal's office or something. So Williams goes on and is talking with Hans, and Hans is just like, hey, like, you have a very unpredictable technique and this and that, and maybe we should trade secrets, and maybe, hey, if you like baseball cards. So all of this is to come to a head to really have Hans question Williams' involvement in him being outside the night before. And Williams is just like, dude, I wasn't involved in what was going on last night, but like, I know who was. So, because Williams is to not go on and give up that information, Hans is to be like, okay, well, I'm just going to beat it out of you. So, Williams is to start to combat these brown doggy security guards that, of course, are just insufficient frickin' anyways, to take on frickin' Williams, who's strong. Man, he's strong. So, Williams takes all these men to just turn around and need to be, like, facing more so against Hans. So, Hans has to go on to have a weird just collection of hands for some goofy reason. And so Hans is to eventually take off this glove, and we find that he was holding or wielding a metal hand. And he also just has a weird collection of other gold and Wolverine hands, and he's got a strong hand, just like the Scary Movie 2 thing. So Hans goes and faces off against Williams, and it's not his fault that he loses here, because Williams is in a whole entire room where everybody is smoking doobies and getting high, and they're all laughing. And Williams is just like sifting upon that high, and he's just like, oh my god, like not only am I having to deal with combat here, but I'm also just kind of getting Mary Janed over here as well. So Williams goes down against Hans, but again, frickin' it's not Williams' fault. It's the Mary Jane. It frickin' did him in. So Roper is waiting to want to go on and talk to Williams, but like he's not going to have that conversation, sadly enough, because Hans ends up coming in and is like, "Oh hey Roper, how's it going? Yeah, like about that Williams guy. Let's talk about that. Let's have a little chat about that." So Hans takes Roper on this tour, and I guess it's the give it a hand tour. Give this boy a hand, come on. Just do a little clap clap. So Hans goes on to show Roper his collection of hands for whatever goofy reason. Even to have Roper see this like bone hand. He's like, what the heck is this? Hans is like, it's my souvenir. Okay. I guess if I can go on and collect collectibles and action figures and bobbleheads and all kinds of other things, like this guy can just collect a bone hand for whatever goofy frickin' reason. Whatever that is all about. What else is going on with that guillotine? What the heck is going on there? So Hans goes on to tell Roper here to come to this guillotine, and Roper is just like, why? But Roper's like, oh no, come on. Like, stick your head right into this guillotine. Just, come on, let's have some fun. And Roper is like, no, not this day, no. Like, I'm getting my hair done. I'm busy. So, Hans then takes his own cat near the guillotine and places it there. And then Roper takes the cat. It's like, come on, man. So Hans then pulls the guillotine to have them go into their bat cave. So Roper is showcasing their underground organization here with refugees and people that are dealing with possibly drugs and a number of other things, just giving blood or taking blood or something to do with like syringes. It's weird. But so after Roper gets a show out of all of this, he's like, hey man, like this is a strange tour. Like, what kind of cities is this tour going to? What locales? Where should I expect this place to go next? So by the tail end of this tour, Hans is speaking with Roper about like, well, yeah, like I feel like you can be the guy that is gonna like take us to the States, to America. And Roper's like, okay, but let's kind of see how this all like wraps up here, all nice and neat. And Hans is like, well, yeah, just kind of look around at your environment here. Roper starts to look. He sees Williams hanging, and Roper's like, he has this like kind of just weird kind of face about him. I don't know what it is. Maybe he's gonna yell out for Godzilla at some point. So Roper is freaking sad that he's looking at Williams. Williams gets dunked in this pool to not just have a good just breaststroke or anything. He's gonna die. He's gonna plump into the water and die. Sadly enough, R.I.P. Williams, R.I.P. So we again have Lee, who's just like, man, I want to get into that underground place. I want to see what's going on down there. I want to see if they have the greatest hits of Styx or something. I don't know, some band somewhere. So, because somebody's going in there listening to headphones, just having a good time. I'm just kind of curious what that's all about. So, Lee goes on to make his way back to the exact same place that he was in prior portion of the film. Just hope that he can rope down to this one location. So, Lee is to be met by this vicious snake as he is to move this pot. So, somehow, Lee becomes the snake wrangler and is to put this snake within this bag. And he'll use the snake later. I guess if he doesn't legitimately have enough rope within that bag, he's got to use the snake for something. So, Lee goes in through this underground cave lair-like thing, starts beating and punching and kicking and a bunch of goons, a bunch of browned, insufficient goons. So, Lee then is to go on and find these guys with headphones. They're popping along. Oh, yeah. Like, did you hear that Christina Aguilera song? Oh, yeah. That definitely was not for this time period. But that was the first thing that just came to mind. So, Lee is to use this snake and it's to just smack it. And the snake is like, hey, what's going on? And so Lee's like, hey, go into this one room to where these guys are forced to just break this window, fly out of here so I can go on and kind of look into what they're doing there. But then also just start to have to fight a bunch of guys. Because all these guys just start coming, and Lee, again, fights them 1-on-1, 1v1, and he starts taking them down. But the further and further Lee is to start to, like, rip his turtleneck-ish, like, shirt, he's to go all shirtless for all this nonsense. He then is to make his way to this elevator that it doesn't seem to work. So he just keeps going into fighting all of these men, where all these refugees are nearby, and they're holding onto these guys like, yeah, let's choke them out, let's kill them. Lee ends up getting this big stick like he went on and did in the other movies that I've gone on and reviewed. This big, massive stick. He has a huge stick. And he starts combating all these men, fighting them off. Then he goes to 2 sticks. And then he goes into, of course, the obvious thing that he has to do in every freaking one of these films. Nunchucking. Just starts nunchucking. Just starts like, hey man, like, you just wait right here. I'm just gonna just start like whipping and flipping the trucks. Just having a good time. So, eventually Lee is to fight all the goons that he can to eventually be really just defeated by this thing called a door. These doors just appear out of nowhere, and Lee is just stuck in this room, and Hans is like, ha 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 ha. You were defeated by doors, ha ha ha. Like, man, what you were doing was, like, unreal. Like, that was some dope like, you were off the chain, Lee. But guess what? We have pulled the chain away from you. No. Man, if that would have been all, that would have been just rolled down. Anyways, so Hans is just like, ha ha ha, like, I got you with doors. Your only weakness. But he was like giving him props how he was like just saying how like he was just really like uh just unbelievable against the threat of all of these men. So we have Braithwaite that is going on to wake up this day and is calling some mofos and getting some helicopters to make their way to the compound to help out Lee, which will take far too long to do so. And we don't even know if Braithwaite or whatever is actually coming along with the ride here. So the following day, we would have Roper that rejoins the group here to find out that Roper is going to need to be forced to face off against Lee. And Lee ends up getting his ropes cut so he can fight Roper. And Roper looks at Han and he tells him, like, you know what? Like, I'm just at a point where this is just something that I just don't want to do. No. I don't want to fight him. So, Roper, instead of fighting Lee, fights Bolo. And Bolo ends up getting Roper in an armbar. But then Roper ends up biting Bolo's leg, like, ah. And so Bolo ends up giving, I think, like a military press. It's kind of like a military press. It's something like along those lines to Roper here. So Roper viciously defeats Bolo with a low blow. He freaking just like crushes the guy's nuts. Freaking goes down, and Bolo's like, "Oh, I'm dead. He killed my nuts. These nuts. Oh my god." So all of a sudden, we would just have all of these guys that are to be on Han's side. Like all these guys in these white dogies, they just come in and they just start fighting Roper, and they just start fighting Lee here. Everybody's just coming on in. And so we have Lee who's going on while all of this is going on, while it's going down. She's freeing the refugees. She's freeing all the guys in the black dogies. All the black attires. Stuff. So now all of a sudden we have a legitimate like the last dragon just kind of fight out between the white karate gear and the black karate gear guys, and some people are just kind of mixing in between. But it's an all-out brawl. Everybody's just duking it out. So we then have Han that is scrambling to get to his one weird, like, hairy claw weapon. So Han has this hairy claw weapon, and he starts to attack some people. One guy gets in the face, is like, ah, and he falls to the ground. Han is starting to get through some people, but then Lee is like, oh, I'm getting to the one guy. I'm going after Han. He's the dude that I need to get to. So by the time both Lee and Han are mixing it up, within that fight, Han loses his hand. He gets a little handless for a little bit. So Han runs off to get to his metalish Wolverine-like hand, his claw hand. Not his strong hand, his claw hand. So he has to break through this thing, gets the... Alright. Like, I can't fight Lee fair. Like, I gotta fight with this Wolverine claw thing going on. So, hey guys, get ready for Deadpool and Wolverine by watching this film. Just get ready for it. Just be aware that this exists. So, God. So, Lee starts fighting Han, and Lee starts taking him down. Even though Han gets some licks in, gets some claws in, gets some strikes in. Like, I think Lee ends up getting hit face first with the claw, the other claw, the hairy claw, and then like we start to get some chest action going on, some chest clawing, and that's when Lee goes on to like ketchup, cornstarch, the choice of the new generation. Our sponsor for today, cornstarch, or corn syrup, or ketchup, whatever goofy blood of which that Bruce Lee is taking a little taste of. He's tasting his own blood. That's freaking weird. So obviously, San the Han, Rise of the Empire, the evil dookie guy, the bad man, Han. He realizes that he's just not a match, even though he has Wolverine hand. He then goes on as to be grabbing this spear and be poking at Lee with it, but it doesn't work out. So when Han is to stab the spear into this wall, we would then realize that Han is to flip into this mirror room. And so Lee is to have to go on and like, okay, I guess I have to follow him in this mirror room. Man, hopefully I'm not going to go on and just get double vision here. So Han and Lee are now in this room. And there, of course, is to have Lee kind of slowly, methodically making his way into this place. And at some points, we would have Lee get at Han, but then Han also is to claw Lee in the back. So the big takeaway out of all this is to eventually have a pause with Lee to figure out whatever the heck that his monk character had told him in the early part of this film about illusions and figure out a way to just kind of defeat those illusions. So Lee goes on and is to start taking all the mirrors, and he starts breaking all of them. He figures out a way to just take all the mirrors down to then focus on what is the real Han here. So this fight roll climax as if we just nutted right now. And Lee goes on and takes this spear and is to have Han hit into it. Let me back up a little bit. So Lee goes on and is to kick Han. Han falls and falls right into the spear and dies. Oh! Tell my wife I love her. How many wives that I probably have, because legitimately I don't have any wives. All I have is just a ton of daughters that bizarrely are my bodyguards for some weird, goofy reason. So tell all my daughters that they have a good portion of the fortune of whatever I was freaking having. So yeah, so like, legitimately Lee would have had to have gone on and probably have had to have killed all of those women also. So that way they wouldn't have to have carried on Hans' business. But he didn't do that because that would have been kind of shady for him to just do that. But anyways. Cut off the head of the snake. Two more won't rise, I guess. So finally, after Lee is to murder Han here, makes his way back to find out that all the refugees are like, hey man, and he's like, and I was like, oh, so that's where, like, is that where it freaking came from? Because I swear there's a number of action movies that they're all just like, and they're like, I'm like, why are we doing a lot of this? What does this mean? Good job? Good job. Anyways, so Roper is looking at Lee, and Lee is looking at Roper, and they have the thumbs up moment. Maybe they're like the presidents that when they do the whole speech, they have the weird thumb there. I don't know, but it is what it is. So they're thumbing up. The helicopters are coming, and that's how the movie ends with the weird hook thing to just kind of be the last visual that we are to go on and see. Maybe that's to somehow like have that the hairy claw man is gonna come back in the squeakquel. I don't know. But anyways, I think that I need to go here because I'm trying to get at least under the time of which the movie had gone on and been a thing. But I tried to make this just as comical as I could, but I realized also that I was stretching, and I'm sorry. But either way, I got at least Enter the Dragon under my belt and had a fun time while doing it. At least for like. Also, it's just kind of weird. Like, I wasn't thinking that like a Bruce Lee movie wasn't gonna ever be a big thing on the channel, or at least big in comparison to the run I've had lately, or the run I've not been having lately. But again, like that's all sour grapes. Just because, like, at least I found this. Like, at least I was to go on and like have some kind of hope like going further into the channel to just be like, okay, like I can at least plan this out and see if this works, and if not, then like I'll just still have a billion other movie titles and shows that I could still just pick and choose from, that I still like. I'm like, man, like what a massive mistake I have made, because there's a lot of big titles that I'm still just kind of holding back instead of just going on and just kind of reviewing them on the channel. Really, that could all just be about like the timing of how long some of these reviews like take to put together and whatever. But then also like it's really like there's a lot of stuff that just kind of goes behind the scenes of me like just kind of getting delayed with otherwise like having some kind of thing pop into my brain, and I take so much time and invest so much time to that one thing that it just kind of derails a lot of other stuff that I can go on and do. Uh, it's just the way I work. It's just the way uh, eventually content will at some point get onto the channel. But yeah, like I have like so many uh like projects, probably almost close to maybe like 100 just things that I'm just kind of brain thinking to be a future, like, well, hey, if this doesn't work, I have B, C, D, every other letter of the alphabet uh that I can substitute with. So like at least there's that. But then again, like I'm also like I'm not doing a lot of videos in one day, and that's probably all being just derailed uh, because of uh, again how like late these things are going and how tired I get and whatever. But uh, again, sour grapes, sour grapes. At least I have a plan. Like there was a long stretch of time when I was really get back into this, where I was just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'll just choose these movies. This movie sound good, right? Um, but like it was all just about like, okay, let's just kind of get this done, because I know that I have other things that were kind of taking away from this and were more of a focus. But so now that I'm trying to focus on this as much as possible to put the best product out there, uh, now I'm just like, man, I'm hoping that this just kind of all comes together to finally make some kind of impact. But then again, like I still feel that a lot of my successes were to have been in the past. But hey, thank you for going on and watching this. Thank you for going on and listen to me rant and blabber and whatever. I'm gonna get the heck out of here so you can go on and just not have to listen to me for this lengthy amount of time. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.